Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. Before we begin, can I just check that you can hear and see me? Lovely, lots of nodding heads, that's what I like to see. Thank you very much. Well, it's now 2 o'clock and it's time for me to open this hearing session on Matter 7, the IP1 Area Action Plan. As you probably know by now, my name is Karen Baker and I'm a Chartered Town Planner. I've been appointed jointly with Mike Hayden, who is also a Chartered Town Planner, by the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 as amended, to hold this examination into the soundness of the Ipswich Borough Council Local Plan Review, which I shall refer to from now on as the plan, and to produce a report of our conclusions and recommendations with regards to soundness. Could everyone please make sure that your mobile phones are switched off or that they're on silent while the hearing is in session, please? And could you also ensure that your microphone is muted until you are invited to speak, so that we can avoid any disturbance from background noise or feedback from microphones on computers? Thank you. The hearing session is being live streamed as well as being recorded by the Council and will be published shortly after on the Council's YouTube channel with a link from the examination website for interested parties to view. Our role as inspectors is to assess whether the plan satisfies the requirements of the 2004 Act, the relevant regulations, and whether or not it is sound. In order to be sound, the National Planning Policy Framework states that plans should be positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. Now, as you all know by now, Annette Feeney is the Programme Officer for the examination. Would you like to just say hello, Annette, please? Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Annette works for us and independently from the Council. She is responsible for all administrative arrangements, and outside the hearing sessions, any contact you make with us should be through Annette. Thanks, Annette. Our guidance note, which can be found in the examination website at J6, outlines the procedures to be followed at the hearing sessions, the way in which written representations will be dealt with, and the availability of information. The way that we expect participants to behave during the hearing sessions is also set out for ease of reference in our virtual hearing etiquette guidance, which has been sent out to all participants along with their invitations. The hearing session this afternoon is programmed to finish no later than 3:30. However, there may need to be some flexibility on that, and I have got quite a few questions this afternoon, but I'm hoping that we can get through them fairly quickly. The hearing will be in the form of a structured discussion, which I shall lead, following the previously circulated agenda, which is based on the matters, issues and questions paper already circulated. I shall invite people to speak at particular times, but if you have something to contribute at the appropriate part of the discussion, then please indicate your wish to speak by using the raise hand function on Zoom. We ask that you keep your cameras switched on for the entire session if possible, but with your microphones muted until you are invited to speak. The only exception to this is where there is more than one participant per representative, and in these cases we would ask that only one participant has their camera on at any one time, with the exception of course of the Council who have their barrister present. And my colleague Mr Hayden, as you can see, is also in attendance and he may also have some questions. There may be some questions on which we now have enough information, and so there may be little or no discussion on these. We would also like to remind participants that you should have provided all of your evidence in your original representation, and the hearings are not an opportunity to submit anything further. Any comments you make during the hearing session should therefore relate to points made in your original representation. And we have read these and the hearing position statements, so there will be no need to repeat what you've already said to us. The purpose of this session is for us to seek clarification or further information on any outstanding questions that we may have. Does anyone have any questions so far? No, lovely. Can I ask the participants then to introduce themselves, first of all, starting with Ms Tafur from the Council, please, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I mean, madam.
Don't worry. That's not the first time.
Oh dear, dear, oh dear. I am Isabella Tafur. I'm a barrister representing the Borough Council, and I have with me Sarah Barker and Carlos Ho.
Thank you. Sorry. As I say, it's not the first time.
I'm sorry, I was on autopilot for a moment.
Don't worry, it's not a problem. And from the County Council, Mr Clow, I see that you're here today. Would you like to just introduce yourself for me, please?
Good afternoon, I'm Cameron Cole, Senior Planning Officer at Suffolk County Council, and I'm joined today by Christopher Fish, Senior Development Management Engineer, who's going to be assisting me on highways.
That's lovely. Hello again, Mr. Fish. Nice to see you. Thank you. Super. Well, if we can make a start then on the agenda, and you should have all have seen the agenda, and the matter is, as I said, is matter 7 that we're dealing with this afternoon, and the issue is whether the AAP for the IP1 area is sound in terms of whether the policies and proposals are clearly written and unambiguous, positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. And in totality, we're looking at questions 195 to 224 of our matters, issues and questions. We have on the agenda certain areas that we have outlined for discussion, and the first of those is the strategy and policies for the IP1 area, and that covers questions 195 to 205. Now, I don't have follow-up questions on every single question, you'll be pleased to know, but if I could start with question 196, and I have a few follow-up questions on this. So perhaps I could start, Mrs. Barker, with you on behalf of the council, but please do say to me if it's Mr. Hone who would be the better person to answer. The first question I have is, what's the relationship between the areas which make up the IP1 area? So as I understand it, it's the waterfront, Portman Quarter, Education Quarter and the town centre. And what's the relationship between those areas and the opportunity areas which are also set out in the plan?
Okay, the 4 quarters are areas where we have specific policies to guide the uses that are appropriate in those areas. And an example, of course, is SP11, which is the policy that covers the waterfront, for example.
Yeah.
The opportunity areas are simply clusters of site allocations within one area that share, that shares a particular character. And the opportunity area section offers guidance, whereas the policy relating to the quarters is policy, so a geographically based policy, if you like.
I see. Thank you. That helps. I just wondered if the plan should make this relationship clear, including setting out how development proposals should be assessed in these areas in order for it to be effective. Would you be able to comment on that for me, please?
We consider that it is clear at the moment, and the IP1 elements run throughout the document really. But if you consider that clarification is needed, we could look at, for example, making that explicit somewhere in the plan, towards the beginning of the plan, for example.
I think that would be helpful. I think, given that I asked the question, it wasn't perhaps as clear as it probably should be to somebody coming in from the outside who'd not read the plan previously. Okay. So I think it would be really helpful to have an explanation, if you like, of how those 2 areas work together.
Okay. There is. We have added new text at the beginning of chapter 6 to try to address some of the issues around the function of the opportunity areas, which I guess we may come on to. But yes, okay, so we'll look towards the beginning of the plan itself to explain this relationship.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful. Yes. Okay. Sorry, certainly I found it a little confusing when I first read the plan as to the relationship between the quarters and the opportunity areas, given that some of those opportunity areas have the name quarter in them as well. So it was a little confusing. So I think some sort of form of explanation, maybe just a paragraph in the supporting text, would be sufficient. But if you could look at that for me, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a further question. In terms of the site allocations and policies DPD, it says that it incorporates the IP1 area action plan. Given the requirements set out in policy CS3 of the core strategy, which specifically refers to the preparation and implementation of an IP1 area action plan, should the AAP be clearly defined in the site allocations and policies DPD? I accept what you said about the references to it sort of running through the SAP, but as it stands, it's not really clear which policies and site allocations in the plan comprise the IP1 area action plan, and we just wonder if that has an impact on its effectiveness, really.
Okay. I think it is. It is very clear in chapters 5 and 6, which are perhaps which are more geographical in their focus, I guess. The allocations have been incorporated into the general allocations in chapter 4. They could be treated separately and pulled out, but I guess our concern would be that you could end up with some sort of duplication, maybe that way.
Sorry, I was just going to say, perhaps I can make a suggestion, because one of the next question I was going to come on to really was talking about in order to sort of help it so that it's effective. I mean, area action plans quite often are standalone documents, aren't they? And as we see it, we saw that there were possibly 3 options going forward, that the AAP should be a standalone document. It should be clearly set out in the SAP, or the third option is should reference to it be deleted altogether, and the policies and allocations simply be incorporated into the SAP.
I think the council would wish to retain the reference to it. I mean, it does represent, I guess, the evolution of an approach that the council's been taking to regeneration for some years now, and that it's delivering the regeneration that you see, will see when you come to visit the town, you know, around the areas identified. There is, of course, the IP1 area inset policies map, which sort of pulls all the you know, the land proposal elements together into one area, and perhaps supports that understanding of what constitutes the area action plan. So I think as well, because it's a document that is used, for example, in bidding for funds, that's proved, you know, very useful and helpful to the council in doing that, and still does so. We would want to retain the reference to the area action plan.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, perhaps in order for it to be effective and for those policies to be contained, if you like, in one place, perhaps the council could look at maybe adjusting the SAP to make it clear precisely which policies and which parts of that document form the area action plan, because at the moment it really isn't very clear. It seems
we could do that.
Sorry, I don't mean to be. I'm trying not to be overly critical, but it's
appreciate it.
It's very difficult as somebody coming in afresh looking at it to work out which elements of the plan form the area action plan. I mean, really, it should be a sort of a standalone or separate document, or a document within a document, if you like. But at the moment, it's neither of those things. And if the council wants to keep that reference, I would suggest that's probably the best way forward, is to doing it that way. Mr. Hone, I see you've taken your microphone off mute. Did you want to make some comments on that?
Thank you, Madam. Really is a point of clarification about how the DPD is set up as it is. We appreciate that there needs to be some clarification and some clarity put into that, and we will definitely take that away. But I think one of the issues is that the IP1 area does have such a high volume of the site allocations within it, and that's where there is, we've tried to reduce that level of duplication. So we've tried to do 2 jobs effectively with the document, but it is essential that we keep the AAP. As Mrs. Barker has said, it forms a fundamental route to some of the funding bids that we put forward to different places. So, but I just wanted to clarify, it's the volume of allocations, which is why there is maybe some confusion, but we'll certainly take that away.
Yeah, I think if you could just have a look at it and maybe come up with some way of identifying the area action plan, and hopefully that would help as well in terms of any funding processes that you have to go through in terms of pointing people to the relevant parts of the plan, so you can just identify the area action plan itself within the document. Okay, was there anything else on that point before we move on? No? Okay. In terms, I'd like to move on to question 197 now, and this related to the overall spatial strategy for the IP1 area. And in your hearing position statement, you refer to the opportunity areas guidance, and you've just mentioned it in response to one of my questions, Mrs. Barker, and it's my assumption that the information set out in chapter 6 of the SAP is in relation to the IP1 is the guidance that you refer to. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, if it's guidance, should it be included in an appendix to the SAP for clarity, in a similar way to the site allocation site sheets, for example? And then I go on to say, if it's policy, should the development opportunities and principles be set out in a policy for each opportunity area? And I think we'll probably come on to that, but we were surprised that there was a chapter in the plan without any policies within it, and whether or not, because you put them there, whether or not they should form policies for the plan, because a lot of the information that's in chapter 6 could reasonably be expected to be seen in a policy relating to each opportunity area. I'm just interested to hear what the council's views are on that.
Okay, thank you. The opportunity area information in chapter 6, it is guidance. It is intended to explain to people using the plan how the generic development management policies on matters such as design or heritage might be interpreted in a particular area, in the areas where we've got these clusters of regeneration sites. So they're meant to be illustrations, and paragraph 6.1 makes that clear, that they're intended as concept plans, if you like, illustrations. It's included in the main body of the site allocations plan. I mean, it could be moved to an appendix, but we consider that it's been effective as part of the adopted local plan within the body of the site allocations DPD. It extends to some point, to some extent, on the information that's contained in the site sheet. So I can see that clearly there is a relationship there between the information in the opportunity area content and the site sheets. But the council considers they're effective where they are, but we're open to considering alternatives, I guess.
And what about the issue of policies for each of the opportunity areas? I appreciate that this is guidance within chapter 6, but has the council considered whether or not elements of the information that's provided there could be inserted into a policy, and would that be more effective in your view?
We don't consider that it would be appropriate in a policy. These are regeneration sites. We recognise that there's a need for some flexibility within the policy to enable these sites to come forward. And actually the policy requirements, as I mentioned, are covered by the development management policies that we have. So, we feel that the relationship as set out at present is effective, that you've got the development management policies setting out general approaches in relation to heritage or whatever it might be, and you've got the guidance in these opportunity areas. you know, drawing out some of the how those key policy requirements might be interpreted on the ground.
I just wonder, because you dealt with the opportunity areas differently, obviously, to the site allocations, and if they're being treated in a comparable way, whether they should be in an appendix like the site sheets are, for example, because a lot of the information that's in chapter 6 is similar in terms of the opportunities and constraints that are included in the site sheets. So in terms of consistency, there didn't seem to be a consistency in approach, I think, is the point I'm trying to make. And I'm also interested to know, you say that you don't consider it would be appropriate in a policy. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry. You also say you don't consider it would be appropriate to include that information in a policy, and I just wondered why that is.
Simply that we've got the generic DM policies that already perform that function, if you like, and the desire to strike the right balance, really, between being prescriptive or being flexible. So, you know, it's not the intention of those opportunity area sections to prescribe how it must be done. It's an illustration as to how it could be done.
I see.
Yeah.
So I suppose the question is whether or not that should be in the main body of the plan, or should be in an appendix if it is only guidance.
Yeah. I mean, we are now pulling the constraints information from the site sheets, aren't we, into the site allocation tables. I mean, I think we would be open to your judgment, really, if you considered it as more appropriate to have it in an appendix. I see. Carlos, do you want to come in there?
Mr. Hone? Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say that we've already agreed to have a look at how the AAP is sort of put forward as part of this DPD document, and as part of that consideration, we can certainly look at the opportunity areas and how they function and fit within that general expectation for the AAP to deliver the development as proposed. As Mrs. Barker set out, that we didn't want to be too prescriptive on the opportunity areas. Only that it's a guide, but certainly as part of that, the review of the AAP as a whole, we can look at where that fits into it.
I think that would be really helpful if you could do that, and let us see your thoughts, and then we obviously can consider that as part once we've heard all of the evidence before we come to a view. So that would be really useful. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking through my questions. In respect of question 198, in your hearing position statement, Mrs. Barker, you say that additional policy text will be added to the SP policies 10 to 13 in order to cross-reference between the allocation policies and the guidance contained within the site sheets. Are these changes included in the appendix to your hearing position statement, or are you proposing to make further changes? And I've seen the proposed main modifications that's in on the website now. So are all of the changes that you're proposing to policies SP 10 to SP 13 in that document now? Is that?
Yes. So, for example, main modification 98 in document K7. So this introduces the text that applicants also need to comply with relevant development management and other policies.
Yeah.
Appropriate to the allocation. Is that the wording you were?
Yes, that's fine. It was in reference to something you said in your hearing position statement about the policy text. I just wanted to make sure that what you were referring to in that was changes that are being proposed in the main modifications document. That's absolutely fine. I didn't want there to be something else that was coming in that I wasn't aware of. And do you feel that those changes are sufficient to ensure that policies SP 10 to SP 13 would be effective?
Yes, we are. Yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously, because we've got the local plan split over 2 documents, it is important that someone reading one part of the plan realises that they may need to refer to something else. So whilst, as a general rule, we try not to overdo cross-referencing, I think it is quite important here, and I think it is helpful to introduce that new wording.
Okay, thank you. And in your hearing, sorry, I'm moving on to question 204 from our MIQs, but a follow-up question to that. In your hearing position statement, you refer to a proposed change to policy SP16 to refer to the potential route of the wet dock crossing being shown on the IP1 area inset policies map, and changes to the supporting text to reflect Suffolk County Council's advice in relation to the route. My question, which I've prepared before the main modifications were updated, is have you prepared those proposed changes for consideration, and are they in this document now?
I have to admit, I thought we had, but I can only find reference in our position statement, so I apologise. I don't think they're in the modifications document yet.
No, I couldn't find them, but I just wanted to double check. So will you add those in, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. And finally, on this first area, question 205, how would the proposed changes agreed in the statement of common ground between the council and the highway authority, I think that's in I17, ensure that policy SP17 is justified, effective and consistent with national policy? Mr. Clough, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, so we were sort of, for that modification, seeking sort of greater clarity on the proposals to prevent sort of parking issues potentially undermining the sustainable transport proposals, and we're happy with that wording that we've come to.
And this is the one included in MM 101, isn't it, now in the...
I'm sorry, I don't have that main modification number in front of me, but I will.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Barker. Yeah,
it
is. That's fine. I just wanted to double check that was fine. Is there anything else that the council would like to say on that proposed main modification? No? Okay, lovely.
Fine.
Thank you. Can we move on then to the IP1 opportunity areas? And this covers questions 206 to 215. Sorry, my first question relates to a point we've already covered in terms of whether or not the information set out in chapter 6 is guidance or policy. So that's been clarified to be guidance, which is fine. Thank you. Yeah, and the next question I had also relates to whether or not the development opportunities and principles will be better set out in a policy for each opportunity area. But as Mr. Hone has suggested, you will have another look at that as part of the review of the AAP. Yeah, question, sort of follow-up question to 207. I think we've probably covered a little bit of this, but on what basis does the council consider that it is clear which policies in the plan apply to the opportunity areas, as they're not stipulated in chapter 6, nor are they listed after the designation in the key on the IP1 area inset policies map? And I just wondered if there was a point of clarification there that could be looked at to ensure it's clear.
There is a modification proposed number 105.
Oh, thank you.
In the modifications document K7.
Yeah.
And that modification adds the text that the opportunity areas should be read with consideration to the SP and DM policies. I'm just going to...
Sorry, you say MM 105?
Yes, I'm just going to check. Okay, so it's Appendix 11. It refers you to Appendix 11.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to check something in the wording because I think
Oh yes, it's in the amendments to paragraph 6.1, isn't it, in Appendix 11?
It is, but I just noticed actually that the text says the opportunity area policies should be read with consideration, which is perhaps a little confusing. So I'd suggest we change that to guidance.
Yeah, unless you come to the conclusion that policies would be preferable.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. But the more general point stands that it's clarified there that this section of the plan needs to be read with the SP and DM policies. So
Okay,
I think it's a helpful addition.
Thank you. And I think we've probably already touched on this, and probably Mr. Hone, you may want to come back on this, but my next question was, should the site allocations within opportunity areas be included within Chapter 6 in order for it to be effective? Again, the point you made was that there are so many of them, wasn't there, and trying to avoid duplication. Was there anything else you wanted to say in response to that?
No, that was the only point I was making.
Okay. In terms of question 208, sorry, we've already talked about that, and you're going to look at that, so that's fine. In terms of question 209, I'd like to just ask, how would the development opportunities for each area enable development to come forward? Mrs. Barker, could you explain how that would happen, please?
Okay, thank you, Inspector. So as I've mentioned, the opportunity area descriptions and maps are included as guidance, so to guide the development that's expected to take place. The actual site allocation policies indicate what would be required, you know, in relation to mix or the particular uses on the sites within the opportunity areas. The opportunity area guidance does highlight, for example, where there's opportunities that could be taken to improve the townscape and public realm as part of delivering developments. They help with the information they provide to understand the context in putting schemes together, for example, and also help to convey what the council's aspirations are for these areas. Sorry, the other aspect I've touched upon is that they can be used and in fact indeed are used to bid for funding, which can obviously support delivery as well. So you know, those are the ways in which we expect them to help with the delivery of developments.
And the point I was just going to pick up on is you referred to the current plan, the 2017 plan, and the fact that these are set out in that document. And I just wondered what evidence you have to show that's been effective in the last few years in bringing forward development opportunities for each of those areas, and if there's anything you can point to demonstrate that how effective that's been.
Well, an example that comes to mind is in the education quarter. The education facilities have been under development since around about 2007-8. But most recently we have seen the development of the Hold within the education quarter, which is a new record office and an archive, and it has strong links. It has some educational functions and therefore links through to the university and the college.
Sorry, did you say that's called the Hold?
The Hold, yes.
HOLD.
Yes,
that's fine. I thought that's what you said. I just wanted to make sure, so that when we come and do our site visits, we can go and have a look at.
Yeah.
That's fine. So those are your examples of how effective this has been so far.
Yeah, it's one example of the education quarter. Yeah.
Okay. And moving on to question 210, a follow-up question there is, on what basis was the extent of each opportunity area defined?
The opportunity areas are based on the clusters of sites
The allocation.
And yes, sorry, site allocations. Yes. So yes,
that's fine.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. I wasn't clear on how they've been defined. So, obviously that makes sense given what Mr. Hone has said already in terms of the allocations being grouped together. And how, in terms of question 212, Mrs. Barker or Mr. Hone, I'm not quite sure who it would be to respond to this one. How will the work with Homes England bring forward other sites within the opportunity areas, and what's the timescale for that? Mr. Hone.
Yes, thank you. I think that whilst we're engaging with Homes England, that's not the only route to fund delivery on some of the more difficult sites. So I'd like to make that point. Certainly our work with Homes England is there generally, and I've mentioned in previous sessions about the 3 strands of work that we're looking at. In terms of the area action plan and the site allocations within it, the effectiveness has shown that we have a planning application going to our committee tomorrow for the Grafton Way site for 173 dwellings, and there have been third-party developer bids to funding. So, for example, the Wine Rack development secured funding direct from the LEP, and whilst the council were involved, that funding was made direct to that developer.
Okay.
In terms of the AAP and that security that you have or the security that developers have in the council about bringing sites forward, over the past 2 years, there's been approximately £25 million worth of funding that's been awarded or granted to the council for a variety of different projects, and those are from different bodies as well. So there's grant funding from the New Anglian LEP, there's the Arts Council funding, Coastal Communities funding, Heritage Lottery funding. So as you know, there's a variety of different strands to funding that can be available. So it's not just Homes England, and the council has been very successful over the past couple of years. And some of that is on the basis of having a strong area action plan and local plan that's adopted.
Okay, so there are lots of funding sources that you're using, and from what we've heard during the course of these hearing sessions, you've been very proactive as a council in seeking those funding streams, and successful in them being awarded to you. And do you see those sort of ongoing into the future, Mr. Hone?
So the £25 million I've just mentioned is funding that's been received or confirmed from a variety of sources, and that doesn't include any funding bids that we put into the Towns Fund, which I think the deadlines were last week, and no doubt there'll be a press release in the next few days regarding that. I'm sure that will cover the additional funding that when it becomes in the public domain. But certainly I think that there's clear from our discussions with Homes England, there's a number of really difficult sites in Ipswich, and we acknowledge that. However, part of the approach is to have these sites as part of the regeneration considerations for the plan, and we will continue to work proactively, not just with Homes England, but with other funding bodies to try and bring them forward. It's an essential part of the council's role.
Thank you. Were there any other points on this before we move on? No. I'd like to move on then, if I can, to IP028B, which is the Dewsons site at Greyfriars Road, and question 216 in our MIQs. And really, it's a question for the county council as well as the borough council. Should policy SP4 include reference to the need to undertake archaeological assessment in accordance with policy DM14? Mr. Clow, did you want to say something about this first of all?
Yes, the sort of, I mean, we were sort of content with the policies set out in the plan with regards to archaeology. Our concern was with some of the information on the site sheet, which we noticed an inaccuracy in the submission draft consultation, which we've now addressed in our statement of common ground with the Borough Council, and we'd be happy with that. And that's in main modification 168.
Thank you. Would the council like to say anything further on this point? Mrs. Barker, did you have anything further on that?
I don't think so. We're happy with the proposed modification.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. In terms of IP 226, which is Helena Road, Patterson Road, and question 217, I had nothing further to ask on that. So if we could move on to the waterfront policy SP11, and this covers questions 218 to 221 in our MIQs. And question 219, I have a supplementary question in relation to that. And it is to the council. Is it sufficient for the opportunity areas to be identified only on a map within the plan, as agreed with Historic England in the Statement of Common Ground, or should these opportunity areas be defined on the policies map, particularly if Chapter 6 goes on to include policies in respect of each opportunity area? Mrs. Barker, I just wonder what your view is on that.
We have agreed to include a map in Chapter 6, which I think you've just referred to, and main modification 105 in document case 7, which I do think helps to clarify where the opportunities areas are without the massive information that's on the policies map. They are also on the IP1 insert.
Okay.
So they are on there. So I think, you know, our feeling is that between those two maps, the illustrative map within the document itself, and then the IP1 area inset, that it should be clear where those opportunity areas are.
Okay. Thank you. And in terms of the proposed change to policy SP11, which is set out in 7.1 of your hearing position statement, I presume this is also now included in the schedule of main modifications. How would that ensure that the policy would be effective in your view, Mrs. Barker? I think this probably is a point we've already discussed in terms of applicants needing to comply with the relevant development management and other policies appropriate to the application point. So I think you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, I just bringing up that modification to check that I had the right reference. Yes, it is. It's yeah. Well, again, it's yeah, the same point really, that it helps to draw plan users' attention to the fact that there are the development management policies, which they should also check.
Okay. And is the proposed change to policy SP12 in your hearing position statement, is that the same as MM99?
So yes, the SP12 change is MM99. Yes, it is. It is.
So in terms of the wording there, how would that ensure that that policy would be effective? And this changes the wording, doesn't it, in the second paragraph,
Yes.
to say the council will consider waterfront uses positively rather than would consider waterfront uses on their merits.
We feel that it provides greater clarity about how an application would be considered against that policy.
Okay. Do you think that that's sufficiently precise in terms of the wording?
I do, yes, I do.
And is it clear from that what is required of any development proposal in your view?
Yes, it is. It is.
Can can we move on then to the Portman Quarter and policy SP13, and this covers questions 223 and 224 of our matters, issues and questions. And again, this relates to a proposed change to policy SP13, which is set out in your hearing position statement. And I presume that's MM100, is that right?
That's correct.
And again, it refers to the same change as MM98 does to policy SP11, doesn't it? So
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything further you'd like to add in respect of that and the effectiveness of that.
No, we're happy with that proposed change. Thank you. There is an additional matter with this policy that we have spotted, and that is the reference to DM31, which should actually read DM32.
Okay. Can that be updated on the schedule? Is that,
We'll do that, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have no further questions. I've rattled through those quite quickly, I'm afraid. Sorry if I've been too fast. Mr. Hone, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just as you're concluding, Madam, I think that I'd like to go back to the issue that the council has agreed to look at, which is providing more certainty about how the area action plan works within the DPD and how we present that to you. I think it will be quite a large bit of work to actually formulate exactly what it looks like. And what I propose, and obviously it's up to you whether or not you accept this position, is that we present effectively a framework of chapters and how they relate to each other in the first instance as a way of moving it forward.
That would be fine. It would also be useful actually if you could come up with a timescale for us for the whole of that work and set it out in a note to the programme officer so that we can obviously agree to that. Or otherwise, depending on how long you suggest. But if you can give us an indication of how long that's likely to take you to do, that would be very helpful, just in terms of our timescales and working out when we're like to have all the information that we need. Is that possible, Mr. Hone?
Of course.
Thank you, but I'm happy for you to sort of submit a framework initially, and then for the further work to be undertaken once that's been agreed. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Mr. Hayden, did you have any further questions on this at all?
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy with the answers that have come forward. So yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything further they'd like to add before we close this hearing? No? Well, thank you all very much for your time, and we'll see some of you tomorrow. So thank you. I'll close the hearing on that note. Thank you.
Madam.
Thank you.